Good part of the day to everyone. We're continuing with our program, questions and answers. We decided from the very beginning. A warm-up before reading Srimad Bhagavatam has great significance. Just like a builder who wants to build a house, before actually building the house, first of all they have to prepare the foundation. So they clear the place, dig a big hole, and then start with the foundation. And in our case we'll do something very similar. We only have 4 full days before the beginning of the marathon. So we'll speak about step-by-step process of how to properly absorb ourselves in reading. As you can imagine, such extensive amount of reading will require a very serious mental effort, strenuous mental effort. So if someone is not used to reading so much, or haven't been reading lately, so at some point a person may feel a little bit tired, or apathy, or lethargy, will experience lack of enthusiasm. And it's very important to put enough effort to overcome these things and to maintain one's determination. And it may be possible that person will be very enthusiastic in the beginning and they might even read half of the whole thing, but then they might find some very valid reason why not to carry on with the reading. They might find some doubts with the philosophy, or maybe just general tiredness. And it's very important to take a proper break. So whenever one feels tired, one should take a little break. A little break that one can take by themselves. So we'll be discussing different subtle points in regards to this topic. Thanks everyone for the questions. Yeah, all the questions are very pertinent, and they're very much in the line of our discussion, meaning about eating, about exercise, about the schedule during the day. Because it is a marathon, it is a mental marathon. And if it's performed in the right way, then the reward will be a very strong intelligence. Everyone will feel that by the end of the marathon the intelligence will become very strong. And people may experience increase of mental strength, determination, or freshness. Because we'll be reading a piece of literature where people or personalities of different levels, beginning from normal people, sages, and the Supreme Personality of Godhead Himself, are setting an example of behavior in different situations in life. Just like in our lives we'll be facing many different situations, many testing situations, so we'll be required to respond to them internally and externally in a proper way. Yeah, so this is the spiritual science. Okay, so first things first, if you still have questions, please send them. You probably have all the details of how to send your questions, so in the course of this discussion today, we'll try to answer your questions one by one. So if one feels that they're really ready to overcome themselves and do something very extraordinary, they manage to create this particular mood, and you want to do it as if it's your last 7 days to live. So it means you want to give your full self to this marathon, something that you want to fully concentrate upon, and you want to dedicate your full potential so that Srimad Bhagavatam can fully manifest its qualities to you. Just like if you, as we said, you only have 7 days to live, and this is what you really want to do for the last 7 days of your life, then we recommend to wake up maybe around 2 a.m. 2:30. wake up, and if you feel it's difficult to take a shower straight away, you can just wash your mouth, sprinkle some water on yourself. So by doing this, by sprinkling water, one can take the contamination of the sleep from themselves. Yeah, and it's very important for everyone to take a full bath, full shower after they wake up to purify the contamination of the sleep. While we sleep, the body produces different toxins. So our body, our clothing in which we sleep is contaminated. So if you wash your mouth, wash your feet, and sprinkle some water on yourself and just leave the place where you were sleeping, then you can start trying absorbing yourself in reading for, let's say, for about an hour you can absorb yourself in reading. Then you can go and take a full bath. It's very auspicious, you'll become fresh. All the sleepiness will go away. That means that the meaning of the Holy Scriptures will open to yourself in a much deeper and profound way. So if you never had experience of reading so deeply before, you will feel the difference of reading before taking a shower and after. At the same time, there are people who are already more elevated than any of these kind of regulations, and they're not affected by the rules of nature. And it doesn't really make any difference for them when to take shower, because their consciousness is already above the rules of material nature. But these are exceptions. We should not consider ourselves to be on that level, so for us it's best to take shower in the morning. When you will be taking rest, make sure that the place where you sleep is nicely aired and there is nice air circulation there. So this prana, or life force, which comes into our body through air, will give your body a very strong impulse for recovery and rejuvenation. So even a little bit, the window has to be open, so fresh air is coming into the room where you sleep. So the place where you sleep, strictly speaking, has to be like this all the time, but just try to somehow avoid letting different animals, cats and dogs and other creatures to be in that room, at least for the time of the experiments of the marathon. The reason for that is that the place where you sleep, your bedroom, is a very sacred, very valuable, very sacred place. And when we sleep there, we become very vulnerable to different types of creatures and different energies which can influence or enter in our consciousness. So when we sleep at night, and if there's dirt and filth or bad energy around us, our consciousness is, so to say, is open to this type of influence. And our ability to read or understand something will be hampered. So take all the unnecessary things from the place where you rest, all the filth and dirt. In the same way, there shouldn't be any devices emanating different radiation, for example. There shouldn't be any fridges or microwaves or computers and things like this. Because bedroom is a very intimate space, not in the sense of sexually intimate, but intimately that is a very sacred place where you can increase your spiritual absorption, spiritual practice. And finally, a person even has to fully minimize or reduce their sleep and stop identifying yourself with this body and come out on the spiritual path. So when we reach a maturity on our spiritual development, the same thing has to happen with food. Gradually we reduce the amount we eat and then we stop eating altogether. And of course it's not supposed to be achieved very quickly. And if you don't have a husband or a wife, then it's best to somehow avoid being in the same room or same space, especially in the bedroom with members of the opposite sex. It's very important to remain chaste, at least for these 7 days. It's very important, because if a person is losing control over their tongue, belly and genitals, then their intelligence becomes very weak. And the person will experience a lot of suffering while reading all this, not understanding what they're reading. simply because of the lack of this fire. So please be careful with this fire. How to read books and how to pray at the same time. What shall we stress? Try to make it in intervals. It's for those who want to strengthen their prayer during this time. It doesn't really matter what tradition you follow. The main thing is you do it with full consciousness. Yeah, just don't do it like a ritual. It's my time to do it, or I gave a vow. But try to make it very mindfully. That's the most valuable thing. So while reading books, you'll probably be able to understand yourself when you're requiring to break for prayer. Then you may stop reading, drink some water, sprinkle some water on yourself, keep a little water next to you to always refreshen yourself. And then you can start praying. Give it 20-30 minutes or 1 hour. It depends on your personal choice. For those who want to take very serious not just reading, but also the practice of praying, from one side it's very good and commendable when you are trying to combine these both things, and to make this as an humble offering to a spiritual teacher, or God, or Jesus Christ if you're a Christian. Make him an offering, or Muhammad if you're in a Mohammedan tradition. So the main thing is that we're not doing it for ourselves, we're doing it as an offering. So those who we're doing it for will notice it and give us their blessings for our further spiritual progress. So this is a little tip for those who want to also succeed in their practice of prayer. Probably many of us lately have been lacking in regularity of their prayer and intensity or sincerity, taste, or understanding why we're doing this. Because material activities usually bewilder us. And now if you want to do a little reform, or you want to invest some fresh stream of energy into your practice of prayer, then of course we will recommend to alternate the practice. So you read for 2 hours and then you pray for 2 hours. Read for 2 hours and pray for 2 hours. So in this sense, you can give your attention to the prayers in exactly the same amount as to reading. And some people can even pray more than read. So for reading of Srimad Bhagavatam every day, it probably will take around 6 hours, 6-7 hours every day. Not less than 6 hours. And also, if you want to pray at the same time, then you should allocate exactly the same time. But be very careful and try not to damage yourself. You may plan to do so, but after a day or two, and you will come to understanding that this is probably a little bit too much and you don't have enough time to accumulate all this energy in yourself. So in that case, during this marathon, you can reduce the amount of prayer, but don't reduce the amount of your reading. So don't reduce the education. Just like one saint, a very wise person recently said, in an assembly of other very elevated personalities, he said that the root of education is very bitter, but the fruits are very sweet. So spiritual realization is not just I feel it is like this or like that. It means that we acquire also some real knowledge. Sometimes it seems to us that whatever we feel is correct, but other people may have a different view, and whatever we feel is not how they feel. So there's a particular method or technology by which we'll be able to gain this ability to distinguish between right and wrong. doing things which I think, I do and I say, and for this we require very strong intelligence. And so reading or studying is the process of education, this is an endeavor, we're making some effort, so since we're making this effort, it's best not to reduce it. Again, don't become too fanatical. If you feel it is too difficult, you may take a step back to make 2 steps forward again, as they say. Without fanaticism, but if you will have to make a decision between reading and prayer, so our humble request is to choose reading or studying, because attentive reading or studying is actually equal to deep prayer. So again, studying is non-different from meditation or prayer. But someone might say that prayer can also be equal to reading. But since we're doing this educational program, at least for the 7 days, that please choose to read more. But after the 7 days, of course, you can swap it around, and you can pray more and read a little bit less. And in that way, you can also check yourself, what is the best way for you to understand God and what kind of relationship you have. So to conclude, our main program right now is reading. Our main task is to read the whole of Srimad Bhagavatam. So the next question is how and for how long one has to prepare for the marathon. Just like we announced in the very beginning, this marathon is not a very ordinary marathon. So there are different ways or methods of how to prepare for this marathon, depending on our goal. If our goal is to reach the finish line of the marathon, or at least to run half of the distance, or maybe our goal is to finish the whole thing and do it again. So depending on the goal, the expenses of mental resources will be different. And so depending on that, preparation will be very, very different. Some may prepare themselves in 1 day. Someone might require a week or 3 days. And some even without any preparation. They can just start reading straight away. And while reading, they might be adjusting things as they go. And in our case, of course, we have full 4 days to prepare for it. And everyone, please try to evaluate your life and the way you live. How we can reduce, how we're able to reduce the rhythm of our life, depending how strong we are to do it. So if our psychological and mental potential is very strong, then it will take us very short time to prepare for the marathon. Maybe 1 or 2 days. And if we're not very experienced in changing this strategy or adjusting the strategy of our life, then what can be done? The marathon is already starting, and ready, not ready, we just have to run, and then we can adjust things as we go. So during the marathon, we'll maintain our communication. You can still ask your questions if you have them. So in a sense that during the marathon itself, we'll be able to adjust certain things together. And it's best not to waste time, so we start everyone together. So we'll start all together. So the next question, are we reading with commentaries or not? Yes, as we discussed yesterday, the most important part for us in Srimad Bhagavatam are actually the commentaries, not even the texts themselves. Yes, because the commentaries, they explain everything in much more great detail, in much more great depth than the texts themselves. Yes, the commentaries are very valuable for us because they're specially designed for us. But for our exercise, for our marathon, our reading will have more of a prophylactic nature. So one must read only the texts because it's more of a prophylactic, as we said. But then during the whole year, or maybe 6 months, it depends. Different people read in different speed, so everyone has different reading capacity. I know one lady who read the whole Srimad Bhagavatam with commentaries in about 1 month, or in about 33 days, or something like this. So she just set such a goal and managed to finish it in such a short time. Of course, one can read it even faster than that. So then you can choose yourself the format and the speed of your reading of Srimad Bhagavatam with commentary. So this is our intelligence. It's something that we discussed yesterday. So everyone who will read Srimad Bhagavatam, and the indication of that they actually made some spiritual progress, and the indication that you made some positive spiritual change in them, is that they develop a very strong, insatiable desire to read the commentaries also. Because the commentaries, they make Srimad Bhagavatam relevant today. Srimad Bhagavatam describes the stories which happened millions and millions years ago. Yes. And to establish the connection of Srimad Bhagavatam with our day-to-day situation, a person commenting it has to have a very serious intelligence. And the commentator, Srila Prabhupada, is a saint who was directly empowered by God to explain this knowledge to the whole world and make this knowledge relatable to everyone. So we need to understand how difficult this task is and what austerities and tapasya, what a difficult task it was to convey this message to the people of the West. Very, very ancient science of relationship of the soul and God, about how this world was created, and so he decoded all this knowledge in great, great detail. And it was done in his old age, means he was very mature at that time. Also during that time he managed to travel around the world 14 times and to build 108 temples and to publish the huge amount of books. No one ever wrote so many books as him. It's about more than 80 volumes altogether. So we can clearly see that ordinary person will never be able to do anything like that. He clearly was empowered by God. So he translated the ancient text for us, and also here is written the commentaries. That's why reading the commentaries is very important, and even more important than the text themselves. But in this particular case, as we discussed, it's best just to read the text. It's a learning method, if you wish, and it will be for our benefit. So even if you read with commentaries, for example, in the beginning of chapter, it's recommended to first read the whole chapter without the commentaries, just to get the general idea of what is going to be happening in this chapter. And then for more in-depth study, one reads the commentaries also. So in the same way here, we just read through the whole Srimad Bhagavatam, just to, in future, read it again with the commentaries. But of course, if you read the Bhagavatam before and you want to read the commentaries also, there's no problem with that. The only thing that you won't be able to read the whole Srimad Bhagavatam in 7 days. But as we said, there are no losers in our marathon. So start reading with the commentaries. You may even start today. Start reading. Read and read and read. And after some time you will become so inspired that gradually you will read and finish the whole of Srimad Bhagavatam. Next question. What is the recommended amount of verses to read a day? So, try not to rush it. Don't become too attached to different numbers. But on average, try to read about maybe about 40 chapters, 50 chapters a day. So that will be our average pace. Maybe it will be taking about 6-7 hours. And it's quite possible to read 40, 50 chapters. And those are very experienced readers. They can read up to 70 chapters. There's no problem with that also. And the main thing here is not the speed, but to read everything very mindfully, to understand what we're actually reading. Next question. You mentioned about eating lightly. Can you please elaborate on that? So the food has to be light. Raw food, fruits, vegetables, not fried or boiled or heavily processed. Otherwise they'll become heavy. So if you'll decide to boil vegetables, for example, so in the Vedas and Srimad Bhagavatam, particularly in the commentaries, Srila Prabhupada explains That cooked vegetables or cooked food means everything which was cooked in ghee. So in the Vedic culture there is no such particular understanding of frying something, because frying essentially is boiling in oil, boiling in ghee. So if it was cooked or if it was processed, it was fried, as we say, then the food changes its nutritional qualities. So that means if you boil vegetables, for example, in water, so according to the Vedas, it still remains raw. So that means light food means we don't process food with too much oil. And one may eat 1 tablespoon of clarified butter a day, and that will be enough intake of oil. Nuts also can be taken. Heavy food is when the person eats grains, beans, lentils. We won't even mention meat. And if they mix all these things together, or if they mix fruits and vegetables, mixed fruits and vegetables is very, very heavy food to digest, especially if someone would drink cold water or cold milk after that. So it will be very heavy for the body to process, and especially if you polish it off with some sweets on top. So it will become not just heavy, it will become very heavy food. So the body will never absorb any nutrients from such kind of food, and it will be just rotting away in one's intestine and produce toxins. And these toxins will start poisoning our liver, our brain, and of course our reading will be very inefficient. Because when such impure toxic blood reaches our brains, our thinking becomes very slow and impaired. So these are some details about that. Light food means it's eaten on time and it's balanced. So first you may have some drink, and you can take some salad, maybe some soup after, or maybe porridge, but it has to be in very small, very little quantities. We don't need much. Also, it is important to chew your food very well. And in the end you can take something sweet. And in general, if you want to eat less, it's best to eat sweets in the beginning. It will decrease your appetite. So this is an example of some light food. Of course, the lightest thing is water, maybe some sweet water, some fruit juices. This is the most lightest. Maybe some dry fruits. Buckwheat. It's very light because it's not a grain. So one may also take some buckwheat because it's very light. You may add some ginger. It will increase your digestion. Just a little bit. Or if you have access to good quality milk, if you have a cow, or you know someone who has a cow, milk is also very good food. It's very light. You can actually just take milk for the whole 7 days. You can drink it as much as you like and any time you like, but the only thing you just need to take only milk. So milk is also very satisfying and nourishing. How people who have jobs can take part in the marathon. Please carry on with your work duties if the place where you work is not giving you a holiday for the time of the lockdown. Carry on with your work, but the marathon the length of it may increase for you. So wake up early, read before going to work. Then go to work if you work from home. You can read in your breaks, if you have 5-10 minutes during the day. And instead of lunch, maybe spend less time taking lunch in restaurants. They're all probably closed now anyway. So yes, one of the tips is not to spend too much time taking your food during lunch. Of course, one should not rush it also. Don't run away from the table still chewing something. So I just understand this is what I'm eating. As soon as I finished, I stand up and I go. So in the same way, you just minimize your breakfast or your lunch and spend more time reading. And in the evening, after you finished, When you come home, you can also ask your relatives or whoever you live with to bless you, or give you some of their well-wishers. In a nice way, you may ask them not to distract you because you're taking a reading course. So you may give some presents, some fruits, sweets, something to them. Give sweets to children, flowers to ladies, satisfy everyone, and then you can start reading. And then gradually, of course, you may read for longer, more than 7 days, but at some point you will definitely manage to read the whole thing. Don't worry about it too much. We have nothing to lose and everything to gain. And everyone has to judge according to their time, place, and circumstance. Because you can, if you have an opportunity, you can listen to the audio broadcast. I'm planning to read out loud for the length of the whole marathon, and it will be broadcasted. And if you feel that for one reason or another you cannot get yourself absorbed in reading, you can always tune into the broadcast. You may put the headphones in your ears and just carry on with your daily duties, whatever you needed to do. All the recordings will also be available, so you can always pause it and listen to it later. So if one lives far away and there is a big time difference, how can one take part in the marathon? You don't get very much attached to a particular time. You have your own time, you have your own schedule. So according to your particular time, just try to follow it nicely. It is important for yourself to understand the strategy and how you're planning to do it. But during the time we'll have online communication, you may also tune in and join us and hear. Yes, you may hear classes, questions and answers. But if the time difference is too big, then you may listen to the recordings. There's no problem with that. And again, I want to say, don't worry, you won't lose the marathon. You will also be the winner. Just take part as much as you can. Listen to the recordings. And of course, you need to plan your day in that way that you still spend enough time reading for the length of time which is required. So this will be the correct strategy for you. Next question. If I don't have a book, I only have one book out of all Srimad Bhagavatam, is it possible to listen to audio version? So an option can be people who organize this event, they will make sure that everyone has at least an electronic version of Srimad Bhagavatam, so you can follow like that. And in that way you will be able to read from your computer or your tablet or your phone, or you can even ask someone to help you and to print it out. It can also be done. And you may print the whole of Srimad Bhagavatam at home, so you will have the whole set of Srimad Bhagavatam printed specially for you. You also asked if we can listen to audio. Of course one can listen to audio, but the experience of submersion or immersing yourself in Srimad Bhagavatam wouldn't be so deep as just reading it, but it can also be done, no problem. Next question. What is the goal of the marathon? What can we achieve? So there can be many different goals, because our marathon is spiritual, it's not material. And spiritual things can always cover more space or fulfill more goals at the same time, at once. Spiritual principle is always multi-dimensional. And material principle is not so deep, it only covers 3 dimensions. Well, some people can also access maybe 1, 2 more dimensions, but it's rare. So from spiritual perspective, there are many different goals, as we said. One of the first and foremost is to help to relieve the world. Try to help the world during the time of this crisis of consciousness. To remind the world and people about their spiritual origin. There's not enough piety in the world these days. To help people remember that, to help people remember that they're spiritual by nature, There's just not enough piety in the world that everyone can think like that. The majority of people don't understand that they are spiritual beings and the goal of life is to realize themselves. And most people don't even consider that. Therefore, this is the root of most problems in this world. So the more people in the world think within the spiritual context or meditate on these topics, this very fact will make a great positive impact on the atmosphere in the whole world. And the world will become a more peaceful place to be, and people start thinking about these ancient signs of love of God. So one of the goals is to give the world a little break from suffering in that way. We cannot stop the suffering will always be there in the material world. In 5 or 10 years, inevitably something terrible is going to happen again. But one has to look at all this suffering for the prism of spiritual knowledge, spiritual understanding, like the sages. You will all become sages after reading Srimad Bhagavatam. So sages are never disturbed by any of such conditions. So Bhagavad Gita explains that a sage is like a big ocean, although so many rivers flow into it, but it always remains still. So this being equipoised and stillness, this is what we need to spread all around the world, to decrease this craziness and panic. So this is one of the goals, one of the things that we can achieve. Actually, one can set even a higher goal than just to help the world. It is explained, if you water the root of the tree, all the branches, flowers and twigs, everything gets the nourishment. So simply watering the root. So helping the world to relieve from suffering is actually not watering the root, it's just pouring water on some branch which is on fire. Of course, this is one of the goals. If a branch of a tree is on fire, we need to stop this fire in order to preserve the branch so it will give some fruits and flowers later on. But the root of the tree has to be watered also. So one of the things that we can achieve during this marathon is that we officially get the permission to go back home. And this is the main gift, this is the main fruit of Srimad Bhagavatam. It gives us hope that at some point all this suffering will be finished. My own suffering and the suffering of people who are close and dear to me, because we are inevitably connected to our relatives and our friends. So if our karma is a positive one, we can also influence them. So by increasing our spiritual potential, or increasing our spiritual muscles, we can definitely influence our relatives and our friends, those who are dear to us. And this is one of the goals of spiritual people in general, to enrich themselves spiritually so they can emanate this positive energy all around the world, and to help people understand, realize God and their relationship with Him. And this is the goal of human life, to understand our spiritual nature. And of course, Srimad Bhagavatam will fulfill all of these purposes, meaning it will give a glimpse of our true spiritual identity. So anyone who reads Srimad Bhagavatam will definitely 100% will be able to find themselves. So this famous phrase, if you realize yourself, you will realize the whole world, it can only be truly realized through Srimad Bhagavatam. Srimad Bhagavatam opens our spiritual nature from all the different perspectives, from all the different sides. And by saying this, we don't want to detract or belittle the significance of other holy scriptures. This is not what we're saying. No, we respect all spiritual traditions. We respect all holy scriptures. Reading Srimad Bhagavatam is just our practice right now, a practice which will help us to understand the versatility of our lives. This is what Bhagavatam gives us. It gives us an opportunity to see the whole world in a more versatile way. It will help us to see the world on a greater scale, not just from my village or my barnyard, and not even planet Earth. Srimad Bhagavatam draws a much deeper and wider picture of the world around us. And how do we do it? While reading Srimad Bhagavatam, we send our consciousness to this place and the time where all these events were taking place. And because these events, they are related to God or His devotees, it's all spiritual. And that means our consciousness is coming in touch with something spiritual. And the nature of spirituality is that there is no past and there is no future, it's only present. And so by immersing yourself in Srimad Bhagavatam and the Purana, Purana literally means very ancient, very old. And externally, it may seem that we're going somewhere in the past because all these events, they actually happen in the past. But actually it's not exactly like that, because the pastimes of the Lord are eternal. These pastimes are spiritual, and they don't have past. Therefore, in a sense, we're just connecting ourselves with the eternal present. So in that way, we're able to return ourselves in the present as spirit souls. This is the uniqueness and the value of Srimad Bhagavatam. By reading all these stories, we're bringing ourselves closer to present or to our eternal home. And at some point, one day, just by reading one verse from Srimad Bhagavatam, the spiritual reality will open itself to us and we will see our home. Another great value of Srimad Bhagavatam is that it's not written in the material language, it's written in Sanskrit, which is a spiritual language. So many millions of years have passed, but the language stayed the same, in the sense that it still preserves all these spiritual values. That's the meaning of timeless culture. Yes, so Sanskrit is a spiritual language in which Srimad Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita are written, and is the true mother tongue of every spiritual living being. And this is one of the most valuable achievements, to gain the hope that at some point we will be able to return to our original spiritual state. Srimad Bhagavatam awards one with enormous strength of intelligence. By reading Srimad Bhagavatam, a person can become a very, very powerful scientist. If one becomes devoted to Srimad Bhagavatam, if one surrenders himself or herself to that message. It is also explained that Srimad Bhagavatam is not different from God himself. Srimad Bhagavatam is God's literally incarnation. So by enriching oneself with this divine knowledge, a person will become a perfect scientist. And in this life, one will achieve the perfection of life. One will become the most educated person. There is nothing that Srimad Bhagavatam is missing. There is nothing in God's creation which is not described in Srimad Bhagavatam. It means everything is described there. What else Srimad Bhagavatam will give us? It will give us a great attachment to God himself. And it is impossible to be an atheist after reading Srimad Bhagavatam. A person will understand the essence of personal philosophy. And impersonal philosophy is very detrimental for one's existence because it won't allow one to experience or realize the principle of love. Love can only exist between two personalities. There has to be two personalities for the love to be manifest. So when the person rejects the presence of God or his existence in general, by doing so a person is locking themselves in quarantine. And then for many, many lifetimes one will have to take birth in impersonal forms, forms that reject all personal relationship. For example, stone doesn't need relationship with anyone, it just remains in one place. So there are immobile or stationary forms of life. So as you see, there are many, many things that Bhagavatam can give us. But the most valuable is that it gives us the hope that we can gain back our lost love of God. God is a person. Means the soul is constitutionally in love with its creator, with its source. Just like a child naturally is in love with their mother and father. And this is exactly what we need. Exactly what we need to regain is our original spiritual consciousness. So this is what we need to hope for from reading Bhagavad. Thank you, everyone. I hope that during this meeting today we managed to answer some questions which were important for those who were listening to us or for those who are planning to take part in the marathon. And if you will have any more questions, please don't be shy, you can always write to us and ask them. So step by step, at some point we'll become fully ready to enter into this deep mode